Crowdfunding campaigns fail all the time. Certainly more often than they succeed, but I don't know the exact rate, and frankly I can't be bothered to find out. Let's just say that for every successful Kickstarter campaign there are, 20 failures, and for every successful Indiegogo campaign there are 1,000 failures. Yeah, that sounds about right. It's also a sad fact that sometimes bad campaigns succeed and good ones fail. Crowdfunding is a democracy, and democracies are only as good as the dumbest person with a vote. For every Mighty No. 9 or Clang, there's also a Legion 1917 or The Watchmaker that should have gotten funded, but inexplicably didn't. Then there are campaigns for games that look good, but the campaigns themselves were absolute dumpster fires, like Project Rap Rabbit, which I insist on calling Project Rap Battle. Anyway, today we are going to be looking at the top 5 failed crowdfunding campaigns that deserve a second chance. We're going to look at why they failed, and what they could do better a second, or even third time around, to have a better chance at succeeding. Now these campaigns aren't necessarily the best, but they are ones that have good games attached to them that I think deserve a second chance at redemption, or just simply getting funded, however you want to look at it.
Number 5. Edge of Twilight.
Edge of Twilight story is a sad one. First announced in 2006 by new developer Fuzzy Eyes, Edge of Twilight would have been an action RPG with a gorgeous steampunk setting. But the years went by without much info, and the already obscure game dropped off the radar. In 2009, the studio laid off most of its staff, and reports suggested that Edge of Twilight was cancelled. But an odd thing happened. In May 2016, the remnants of Fuzzy Eyes launched an Indiegogo campaign hoping to raise $350,000 to finish Edge of Twilight. It was the first time anyone saw the game in years, and it truly came out of nowhere. While the game's graphics had obviously aged poorly over the last decade, it looked pretty good considering it was worked on by a small, nearly bankrupt developer and was stuck in developmental hell for so long. Not many people would agree with me, however, and the campaign raised all of, drumroll please, $0 after over a month. Despite that though, Edge of Twilight Return to Glory came out anyway in September 2016. This was only Chapter 1 in a proposed series, clearly meant to raise funds and interest for subsequent parts. Unfortunately, nobody cared. The release came and went the same way its mobile prequel story did. Hardly any news sites reported on it, and really nobody reviewed it. The user reviews on Steam are mixed, and there are only 27 reviews anyway. It's so bad that Fuzzy Eyes had to resort to putting a quote from a 7 out of 10 review on their page. There's no chance that the sales from this first chapter will fund further chapters of the game, especially when many of the reviews are already calling Chapter 1 unfinished. That is exactly why Fuzzy Eyes should give it another go. They ran a pretty good Indiegogo campaign with plenty of screenshots, video, text describing the game, and decent rewards. I have no idea why they chose Indiegogo over Kickstarter, given that site's appalling track record, and $350,000 there was hoping for way too much. But if they relaunched on Kickstarter, and led with their backstory about announcing the game a decade ago and, being screwed over by publishers or something, they'd have a good shot. That is the kind of thing Kickstarter backers eat up.
Number 4. Clive and Wrench.
Clive and Wrench is the only game on this list with not one but 2 failed Kickstarter campaigns. A sad feat considering how poorly 3D platformers fare on the site, and even more so compared to the most successful of the bunch, Yooka-Laylee. Created by Rob Wass, the game's first iteration was known as Clive and the Stones, which sounds more like a band than a game. Its Kickstarter campaign ran from April to May 2014 and raised only £537 out of its £25,000 goal. That's because the initial campaign wasn't very good. The game was clearly in a rough state, arguably too early to demonstrate to the public, much less show in the hope of gaining funds. Compare this initial Kickstarter footage with a trailer released about 2 months ago, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Other than that, the page lacked many screenshots, and the text was bland and not very descriptive of the final game. It's not a big mystery as to why this campaign failed, but it must have served as good inspiration for Wass's second campaign. Now simply called Clive and Wrench, Wass launched a second Kickstarter in February 2015. The game had improved massively since it was last seen, much more closely resembling a final game than the pre-alpha footage we last saw. The campaign page itself, while still a little too brief, was at least more descriptive of the game and featured several screenshots and videos. Throughout both campaigns, WAS did an excellent job of posting updates as well. Still, this didn't make much of an improvement though, as this time the campaign raised only £2,249 of the same £25,000 goal. Much like Fuzzy Eyes though, WAS didn't give up. He's continued to work on the game in his spare time, presumably using his own money, and the game looks better than ever. He's still even posting updates on the second Kickstarter page, posting one as recently as last month. He hasn't said when he expects to finish this gorgeous looking 3D platformer, but it would probably go a lot smoother with another Kickstarter campaign, right? With how good the game looks now and maybe an improved reward structure and more detailed campaign page, I would expect Clive and Wrench to do a lot better.
Number 3, Legion 1917.
Legion 1917 Rise of the Bolsheviks would have been another video game taking advantage of the current World War I trend. However, there are several aspects that separate it from the rest of the pack. The first, most obvious, is the gameplay. Rather than a shooter a la Battlefield 1 or Verdun, or a 2D adventure game like Valiant Hearts, Legion 1917 would have been a 3D, turn-based strategy game similar to XCOM. The second, and arguably more important distinction, is that rather than focusing on the war itself, it's instead about the Russian Revolution and the subsequent Russian Civil War, beginning in 1917 and lasting with resistance in the far east reaches of Russia until 1923. Legion 1917 is, fairly or not, most interesting as a history tool. The Western world doesn't think much about the Russian Civil War, and I'm willing to bet that nobody here knows that it was actually a three-way war between the communist Bolsheviks, the White Movement backed by the Allies, and German factions and her allies. This game would have put you in the middle of all of that, allowing you to see events unfold from the ground. Sadly, Legion 1917 failed quite badly. Of its €65,000 goal, it raised only about $9,000, and the developers closed the campaign early. Developer, Sorniak Arts had a pretty damn good Kickstarter campaign, and while I think they relied too much on selling it as a game similar to XCOM Enemy Unknown, I'm not sure what they could do to have a successful run the second time around. From the sounds of their last update, it seems like that's definitely going to happen. They even put up a poll that anyone can partake in, asking for feedback on the campaign and what they think they could do better next time. The poll is fairly comprehensive, asking how much you liked the art style, the gameplay, and the level of communication from the developers. They hit all the right notes for what I'd look for in a crowdfunding campaign, and to see them fail is a head-scratcher. This could just be one of those projects that people don't want or aren't ready for, like 1979 Revolution or That Day We Left, which barely missed this cut, by the way.
Number 2, Fritz.
Oh, look at that, another World War I game makes the list. It's almost like I've loaded it with games I personally like or something. Fritz is a narrative RPG with brutal real-time combat about life in the trenches of the First World War, the Kickstarter page reads. Most of the gameplay is comprised of everyday activities like guard duty, getting food, and talking to your fellow soldiers. Attacks are sparse, but deadly and challenging. Fritz would have focused on the horrors of war from the perspective of an average soldier, not on a powerful entity who could absorb hundreds of bullets at once. Player choice was going to play a factor, determining which of the multiple endings you received. This was a highly ambitious game that offered to bring a lot of possibilities to the table. August 27th, 2014 was the final day of the campaign. It collected over $12,000 to that point, but was still short of its $15,000 goal. The beginning and final days of a Kickstarter campaign are always the most successful, so the team was still hopeful. Sure enough, a miracle came in the form of a backer raising their previous pledge to $3,000, tipping the scale just enough in Fritz's favor. As the deadline inched closer, Fritz raised $15,073, as close as you'll ever find on a crowdfunding website. Yet, instead of popping bottles of champagne and enjoying the success, developer Truthful Entertainment instead hung their heads in bitter disappointment. That same backer who raised their pledge to $3,000 messaged Truthful Entertainment with dire news. It was a mistake. They meant to raise their pledge only slightly, perhaps accidentally adding one zero too many. This came after another backer lowered their pledge by $2,000 hours before Kickstarter's 24-hour pledge rule. Instead of waiting a few hours and refunding the backer after their success, the team canceled the campaign, freeing every backer of their pledges. In a matter of hours, the team went from holding their breaths, waiting for the numbers to grow, to partying like it was 1999, and then having to pick up the pieces of a broken dream and an outdated reference. That was nearly 3 years ago now, and immediately after the campaign was cancelled, it disappeared, as did Truthful Entertainment. Social media accounts were either deleted or never updated again. With the exception of the Kickstarter campaign and an IndieDB page, any evidence of Fritz ever having existed is gone. Somehow, Fritz was fully funded, yet it failed anyway. I have no idea what the developers are up to now. I tried getting into contact with them about a year ago for an article, but never heard back from anyone. This is the least likely game to make a comeback on this list because of all of that. And it's a shame, because it's also the most successful one. There's a lot of potential here, and it's a shame to see it go to waste.
Number 1. The Watchmaker.
What do you do when you spend 2 years working on something only for nobody to care? How would you feel about that? If it were me, I'd probably pack it in, give up, and get a job at McDonald's or Walmart. Unfortunately, that's exactly what happened to Micropsia Games, who spent almost all of President Obama's second term in office working on The Watchmaker, only to see it fail on Kickstarter. Asking for $30,000, Micropsia presented a third-person puzzle platformer with a time manipulation mechanic. But this isn't bullet time or anything like that. The game is set in a massive clock tower, and the main character, Alexander, controls it and the concept of time itself. One day, a mysterious villain sabotages the tower, causing Alex to age rapidly over the course of the game. So you have to grab a time manipulation device and fix the clock and stop the bad guys before you age to your death. The Kickstarter campaign had a demo, freely available to everyone at the top of the page, as well as a ton of screenshots and GIFs featuring gameplay. Yeah, it's pronounced GIFs, fight me. However, it's not that hard to see why the campaign failed. This is an instance of a game on Kickstarter looking great, let down by an awful crowdfunding campaign. At the top of the page, past the pitch video, there's only a short paragraph detailing what the game is before it launches into a torrent of images for stretch goals and backer rewards. Only after you scroll down for what seems like an hour, you finally get to the information about the game. But this too is brief and not very well explained. There's a lone paragraph about the story, one for Alexander, and just a few sentences dedicated to other characters. The gameplay section is nothing but GIFs showing off certain mechanics, and the art section is just a handful of screenshots presented without any context. The team section is just a series of pictures and names without any explanation as to who these people are other than their job title. Their Why Kickstarter section is lengthy, easily the longest part of the page, but it's not enough to make up for the rest of it. The fact of the matter is, there just isn't enough information to go on for potential backers. A demo is nice, yeah, absolutely, but we need to know why we're donating money, and who we're giving it to, and most importantly, what the game will be in the developer's own words. The developers say they're going to keep working on the game, apparently in their own time with their own money, and that's a shame. If they came back with a better Kickstarter campaign, I think they stand a good chance of succeeding. It's clear reading the page and the updates that English isn't their first language. Maybe that's why they're hesitant to include much text on the page, and that's certainly something that should be addressed with a second campaign. They've certainly got the chops, as The Watchmaker looks like it could have been a AAA game. It's clearly been worked on for a long time and a lot of money has gone into it, and the demo, while a little rough, has a lot of promise. It's as my Clickist colleague and secret dog whisperer Joanna Mueller said when she wrote of the game. It's exactly the sort of project that crowdfunding could use more of. That could be said for each and every one of the games on this list. If you enjoyed this list that was originally going to be 10 games long but had to be cut down because I dragged my feet too long on writing the script, though we won't tell anyone that part, why not subscribe for our channel if you haven't already for more videos just like this. You can even check out Clickist.com where you'll find all the latest indie updates and opinion stuff or whatever, and some interviews and reviews, and I'm really selling this, aren't I? Wait till I tell you about the Patreon page. Yeah.